All right, The Contender, Chapter 16, on page 134. Griffin was light and fast. His gloves were a red blur, tapping away at Alfred's face, easy and steady as rain on a roof. Pitter-pat, pitter-pat. Alfred's eyes began to swell, and his nose was clogged with dried blood. Donatelli and Henry and Bud were screaming, "Rush him! Press! Press!" But every time he fired out his jab, Griffin brushed it aside. By the end of the first round, his face felt as if it had been stung by 100 bees. "Attack! Attack! 2 hands!" said Donatelli in his ears, and Bud slapped an ice bag against his face. Henry kneaded the muscles of his back. "Go after him, Alfred." He tried to explain to the ice bag about the red blur and Griffin's speed, but the bell rang. It started again, pitter-pat, pitter-pat, and somebody in the crowd was laughing. He swung wildly a foot over Griffin's head, and the red blur was back, tapping away at his chin. His eyes, his mouth, his nose. He tried to remember his combinations. Left, cross, hook. But Griffin's skinny arms knocked his punches away, and then the blur again. Pitter-pat, pitter-pat, until he was sure that Griffin had 3, maybe 5 hands at work, all needles and pins, stabbing at the bee bites. The bell rang. "This is it," said Henry, tilting the water bottle. "Go for the KO. Only chance to win. Knock his head off." Pitter-pat, pitter-pat. Not quite so fast now. There were only 2 red gloves, and sometimes he could see them before they tapped against his face. Griffin was breathing hard. He's tired, Alfred thought. Tired from hitting me so much. 1 red glove grazed his ear, the first time Griffin missed all night. "Rush him! Rush him!" they screamed from the corner. Somewhere Alfred found a little extra strength and reached all the way down for it, and the next time the red glove missed, he threw his weight behind a short right uppercut. Griffin stopped cold, a pink blotch on his chest. Alfred swung the hook, everything behind the hook, and it slammed into Griffin's jaw. Thunk. Pain shot up Alfred's wrist and exploded into his shoulder. Griffin went down and flopped over like a rag doll. Griffin twitched once and then lay very still on the canvas. 9, 10, winner by knockout. Bud and Donatelli were holding his arms, and Henry was hugging him, but he felt alone and sick. He swallowed back the bitter taste, broke free, and ran across the ring. "Where are you going?" asked the referee, blocking him. "Want to see him. Later. Next bout's coming right in." "Now," said Alfred, dodging around the referee. Griffin was being pulled to his feet. "You okay?" "Huh? I'm sorry I hit you so—" "Forget it, kid," said one of Griffin's handlers. "Lucky punch." "Come on, Alfred." Donatelli's fingers were on his arm, pulling him back across the ring. Alfred kept looking over his shoulder as they slapped Griffin awake and helped him down the ring steps. All the way up the aisle, people stood up and shook their fists and tugged at his robe and cheered. He kept his eyes straight ahead and his mouth tightly closed. He was afraid he might throw up. "Let's look at those eyes," said Donatelli, pushing him down on a dressing room bench. "Just swollen," said Bud, pressing the ice bag against them. "No damage." "Beautiful hook," said Henry. "Was that ever a beautiful hook?" "He just lay there," said Alfred. "That's part of it," said Donatelli. "Like a dead man." "It's happened, Alfred." Bud took the ice bag away and looked at Donatelli, and they stared at each other for a long time before Bud shook his head and Donatelli shrugged. The sound of the hook echoed against Griffin's jaw. The dull, meaty thunk echoed in his mind all the way home in Spoon's car. He heard it in the kitchen, trying to sleep, trying not to see the rag doll flop endlessly to the canvas. He didn't sleep. He left the apartment early before Aunt Pearl woke up. He didn't want to talk about it over breakfast. He walked through the park, careful to avoid the 2 policemen, but there was no way to avoid Lou Epstein when he finally went to work. 2 wins in a row, Alfred." "Yeah. You don't look so good. You want the day off?" "No, I'm all right." There were only a few customers that morning. It was hard to concentrate. His fingers were stiff on the cash register keys, and every time he looked up, Griffin was flopping off a shelf of canned goods. Thunk. Lucky punch. Beautiful hook. Pitter-pat. No sale. Pop, pop, pop. And there was Rivera. The crowd was screaming, "Get in there and fight!" Black boy. Coward. Twice he rang up wrong totals and had to call Jake over to unlock the cash register and correct the receipt toll. All the hate was out in the crowd, he thought, screaming for blood, for a knockout, and the crowd didn't really care who flopped over like a rag doll. Griffin, Rivera, Brooks, anybody. "Go on, Alfred. Take the rest of the day off." "I'm all right, Mr. Epstein." Argue? I don't, Alfred. You're fired until tomorrow morning, 8:30. He felt a little better on the street. A brisk November wind tugged at his jacket, and he pulled his cap down over his forehead. It was nearly noon, but the sun was neither warm nor bright. A few people on the street were moving quickly. Across the street, in front of the school gate, two heavily dressed figures were handing out leaflets. One of them waved. "Brooksy! Hey, Brooksy! Over here!" He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and strolled over. Harold was smiling. His eyes were friendly behind the horn-rimmed glasses. Lynn seemed very small and slim, bundled into a tweed coat. "Hi, Alfred," she said. "We were just talking about you." "How's that?" She handed him a leaflet. "Harold was saying how much he'd like to get you involved in our new recreation program." "That's right," said Harold. "The kids would really look up to a boxer." "Only had 2 fights. It doesn't matter. At least you done something." "Don't have much time now." "Think about it anyway," said Lynn, and a bell rang inside the school. "I will," said Alfred. But Harold and Lynn had already turned and begun handing their leaflets to the children streaming out into the street. He walked on, surrounded by skipping, laughing children. He thought of Rick, the white college boy he and James had liked so much. Alfred half closed his eyes. "Okay, you little kids. Gonna do some push-ups and trunk twisters. Then James here is gonna tell you some funny stories." But James was trembling in the clubroom corner, ripping open his heroin bag, and the crowd was screaming for him to kill Rivera, and Griffin was flopping over like a rag doll. It was too early to go to the gym, and he didn't feel like watching afternoon television. He dropped Lynn's leaflet into a trash barrel and headed towards 125th Street and a warm movie. End of chapter 16.